All right. Hello, ngHouston. We're here live at Improving this week, and we're super excited because we have Reggie teaching us all about serverless Angular. So quick, everybody say hi. Mostly you, Sam. Okay, so we're here, and we're going to go ahead and pass it over to Reggie. So Reggie, take it away.
Oh, man, the pressure's on, baby. All right. For those of you who don't know, my name is Reggie. Reginald Davis is my government name. Reggie is what my mother calls me. I'll allow y'all to call me that, but don't think you're my mother. So her name, Mad Black Man. I promise I'm not mad, but I definitely am black. And today, we're going to talk about serverless Angular architecture. The interesting thing about this is, you know, serverless is just such a very popular topic right now. Everybody's talking about this is the next thing and so on and so forth. And I just thought it would be really interesting to see what it would look like to hook up an Angular 4 app with a serverless architecture, and just what are the pain points? What is this going to be like? What should I use this for? What are the use cases for it? And I'm not going to lie. I put this app together, and I got some of it done, but then the rest of it I failed. But it's fine, because I learned a lot from the entire situation, and I'm going to share some of my pain points of me putting together an Angular 4 serverless app with you today. So here are the things we're going to talk about today. What exactly is serverless? Pros and cons of serverless architecture. Parts of a serverless, the parts that I've used to create a serverless architecture. How much is this thing going to cost me? Because at the end of the day, that's kind of the bottom line for a lot of people. How much is it going to cost me? And is this something worth implementing into a project? So these are the 5 things we're going to touch on. If you guys have questions along the way, by all means, ask me. I'm not saying I'm a serverless expert, but damn it, I know a little bit. So let's go ahead and get this thing started. So what is serverless? So serverless is, I think it's a bit of a misnomer. It's not technically serverless. There's a server somewhere. It's just that now you're not the one having to manage the service or the server, right? They use these different terms. Backend as a service, functions as a service. And it's kind of weird because there's like this weird overlap, right? Because backend can mean a lot of different things. It can mean a database. It can mean an API, whatever. And then you got function as a service, which is probably my favorite name for the thing that most people typically associate with serverless, which is functions as a service. So as I said, it is a bit of a misnomer. And the fact that functions as a service is my favorite name is pretty important, just because it's just that. It's just a function. That's it. So if you need to do this one-off thing, this one-off process, and you don't want to keep that held up in your server on the server side in the script, you can do that. You know what I'm saying? So labor-intensive things, maybe like transcoding files, things of that nature, you kind of pass those off somewhere else, let it do its thing, and it'll return you back to payload, and you're good to go, and you're not creating the stress on your server. Now, it is not necessarily an end-all, be-all. I think people want it to be, but it's just not. At the end of the day, it is just a function. And when you think about putting together a serverless backend, or you think about using functions as a service, you kind of got to start thinking about things like, you know, packages, you know, dependencies, things of that nature. And you can only imagine what it would be like to go from using this one sheet of APIs, right? And now all of a sudden they're all being broken apart into these individual servers. Well, guess what? Now all of those individual functions actually all have to have their own packages and dependencies put together with them. And when you got to do that for, I don't know, 100 APIs, they can get a bit of daunting, right? Because you got to manage all of these things now. It's not like you go to one place and manage the APIs. Now you have to manage all of these different functions across your application, which can be a bit of annoying. So if it's serverless, what happened to the servers? Like I said, nothing. Ain't nothing happened to the servers. They're still there. You just not dealing with them no more. You're not having to worry about patching them. You're not worried about having to monitor them or anything like that. I know with AWS, it's actually really interesting technology they're using with Lambdas. Example, so you got this function, which usually runs in a container, and spin up this container, run this function. Container might exist for a little bit, and then after a while, it goes away. So here's the thing about dealing with functions as a service that I find to be a bit annoying is that you kind of got to think of using your function as a service as like, it's like an apartment in an apartment building, right? It's literally one apartment in an apartment building. The apartment building is a server. The function is the building. So if something goes wrong with your function, and there are 10 other functions going on within this same thing, there are a lot of other tenants in this apartment, and something goes wrong, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to come to you first, because it's multi-tenancy going on within this thing. You're sharing this building with a lot of other functions, and those functions don't necessarily have to be your functions. They can be anybody's functions. So they're literally just taking advantage of resources that they're not using, because while your function isn't running, they're going to just take those resources and throw them on some other function and use those resources on someone else's function. So this can cause some sort of like latency, right? At some point using your functions whenever you're firing these things off. So like I said, you don't have to worry about maintenance or even scaling, you know, like that's one of the biggest things about serverless architecture that people love, is the fact that you don't have to worry about scaling anymore. Some people like to bring up platform as a service, stuff like Heroku, as a way of thinking like, well, that's kind of already serverless. Well, even with Heroku, you still kind of have to think about scaling on some level, right? Because you still got to deal with these dynos and things of that nature. Everybody following? Everybody good? Y'all good? Cool? Questions? Just want to make sure everybody following.
Just one comment.
Yes, ma'am.
Walk over there, we can't hear you quite as well.
Okay, cool.
We can hear you though.
Okay, cool. All right, so they can't hear me. All right.
They can hear you kind of, but if you
These guys can hear me. Okay, all right, cool. So, pros, cost. Cost is the biggest pro of any type of serverless architecture, because you can take a client side, you can take an Angular, you can take a React, you can take whatever, you can put it on the front end, you can store it in the S3 bucket, only pay for the space that you use, and then you can hook up the back end to API Gateway, which we'll talk about more later, which triggers off to a Lambda, and you only pay for the execution of the invocations that you actually use, and that's it. And I mean, you can literally have a web app running $4 a month, and it's like literally very simple. You only pay for what you use, which is very appealing, especially if you're a startup. You have this idea, you got this web application you want to get up, you don't maybe have, you're pretty bootstrapped. Serverless architecture might be something to look into. Now, I'm not saying it's going to be the easiest thing to wire up, but it's definitely something you might want to look into. Reduce development costs. A lot of things you end up getting outsourced. So you got Auth, which is an authentication and authorization microservice. You got Firebase, which is a database as a service that Google offers. You got Lambda, which is functions as a service that AWS offers. So there are a lot of these services that a lot of companies or vendors are offering to customers right now that allow them to wire up their application in a serverless way. Scaling costs. Like I said, with scaling, I mean, you can just scale functions for days. You just scale them for days because you're not worried about which computer or which server it's on or anything like that. It's just, I need this thing to fire off. Boom. Like, how many functions do I need at this moment? Now, there is a problem of concurrent executions with AWS. Right now, there's a limit of concurrent executions of 1,000. And at that point, it throttles you, which can kind of suck. Well, it can suck, because if your function is getting hit, or if you're getting your function hit at one time that much, then you might have to start looking into, hey, maybe we need to kind of start moving this stuff over into a regular server. Horizontal scaling is completely automatic. No vertical scaling, none of that. You don't even worry about that. Just how much do you need? We're going to give it to you. Bada boom, bada bing. And that's really just kind of how it goes. Less components, less work. I don't necessarily agree with this. And I'm going to talk about it more once we kind of get into the nuts and bolts of the app that I put together. It's hit or miss. It's hit or miss for me. But it doesn't require sysadmin, and I'm feeling differently about that too. And we're definitely going to talk about this. I'm actually looking at this slide now. I'm kind of like, man, what am I thinking when I put this up? But we'll definitely talk about it. But the experimentation part made it easy. I think that is definitely very true. If you want to experiment with a backend, you want to experiment with some type of function that does some type of thing, and you want to hook it up to a Lambda, I think it's great. I think it's really cool, because you don't have to spin up this whole server or virtual machine or whatever. You don't have to worry about none of that. You just, hey, this is the one thing I need to do. Let's run this function, and bada boom, bada bing, we're in the game. And it's not a whole lot of patching and let me install these dependencies and all this kind of stuff that you had to normally would do to VM and things of that nature. Cons. Vendor lock-in is an issue, because you got Google Cloud, you got AWS, IBM has their own cloud, you got Ansel, you got OpenStack, you got a lot of different vendors offering a lot of cloud services. And AWS as well, they make it kind of difficult for you to take this Lambda and hook it up to something in Azure, or take this Firebase, and hook it up with something in IBM. They make it kind of difficult. And that's just something, I mean, when you're dealing with the big boys, that's something you're going to definitely have to be, you have to look into. So yeah, you might like the Lambda service, but man, you might not necessarily like the S3 service. You might not necessarily like Elastic Transcoder. You might not like API Gateway. You might not like any of the other services that these vendors are offering. And these are things that you are going to have to take into consideration when you're saying to yourself, hey, I want to put together a serverless architecture. Like, is this a vendor? Do I feel like dealing with AWS all the way around? Or do I even feel like putting in the work to try to hack my way outside of using just AWS? Multi-tenancy is just like I talked about earlier. Your function is literally an apartment inside an apartment room inside of a big apartment. It's no differently than shared hosting. I'm sure y'all familiar with shared hosting. If you've ever built your own website and didn't know what the hell you were doing, you know what shared hosting is, because you're like, man, why is my internet so slow? It's because you're probably sharing that same server with 999 other people. Same situation, same exact situation with functions as a service. And if you're not using your functions, then point blank period, they're not going to allocate you the resources. So when somebody hits you, whenever that function triggers, point blank period, it might not be as performant as it normally would for somebody that's using a Lambda or a function that's having recurring use or consistent use. Their Lambda is going to be a lot more performant. Sacrifice of system control, which there's definitely a lot of sacrifice. I'm just going ahead and put them all out there so I can just talk about it. You're sacrificing a lot whenever you say you want to do serverless architecture. Because basically when you say you're doing serverless architecture, there's a level of trust that you're putting into your vendors or the other microservices that you're using that you might not normally put into your own structure or your own architecture that you would implement on your own. And that's just the reality of it. So if AWS makes a change to their API, if they make a change to their limits, if they decide to throttle you or anything like that, these are things that you're just gonna have to sit back and you're gonna have to deal with it. And there's really nothing you can do about it. And that's kind of one of those things that I'm not really the biggest fan about when it comes to serverless architecture. Yes, they maintain a lot for you, but it's just like kind of like in real life. All right, cool. Like you can have as much freedom as you want to, but that doesn't necessarily mean you're gonna live the life that you want. You might not make the money you want. You might not be able to go to the places you want. But you give me a little bit of that freedom. I'm gonna pay you a little bit more to take your family out to dinner, buy you a nice car, buy you a nice house. All these things, you ain't even gotta worry like, man, I could take care of my bills this month. Man, this could be a good month. But you gotta work 60 hours this week. That's kind of how it goes. That's the game. Right now, when you're talking about serverless architecture. Debugging and monitoring, which is huge, is really, really huge. And the tools just have not really been developed to monitor and debug serverless architecture. Once again, some of this has a lot to do with the fact that that stuff is being shipped off to somebody else. If you want to take your girl out to that nice restaurant, guess what? You got to put in 60 hours this week, baby. This is how it goes. That's how we're going to do it. And it's unfortunate because you want to have more control over your infrastructure, right? You want to be able to look at your infrastructure and be like, boom, there goes the problem here. Let's take a look at these logs. Let's take a look at this here, blah, blah, blah. Not to say they don't have logs, but it's not to the level, it's not to the level of detail that you would normally expect of actual, traditional architecture. Complex architecture. I almost feel like that's an understatement. The complex architecture is, man, it was a pain in the ass. I'm not gonna lie to y'all. This thing was literally having me pulling my hair out left and right because there's a lot of moving parts with this thing, right? You got one service talking to this service and this service talking to that service, this service talking to this service does this, and it finally gets back to the front end. What just happened? Like you're literally looking at your application like, wait a minute, what is happening here? How is this working? How is this working? How's that working? What is this? I spent hours upon hours reading documentation on Auth0 just trying to figure out when I hit Auth0, what is it even returning me? Again, but what is it returning? What is the token is returning me? Where is it storing this token at? What is happening here? I'm losing my mind right now. And it was very frustrating. I'm talking about staying up to 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, looking at my computer, literally want to punch it in the face. And I couldn't do it because I only have one computer. And unfortunately, I don't have the money in the bank to go buy one of those nice, shiny Macs like my good friend Bonnie has. But it is very frustrating to hook up these microservices. And that was just for me. Now, granted, I'm not no serverless ninja or anything like that. And if I spent 8 hours a day, 40 hours a week, something like that, learning serverless architecture, and I had a team of people working with me, might be a completely different monster we're talking about. But just thinking about it at scale is really kind of something that's blowing my mind because I know Netflix actually uses serverless architecture. And when it comes to transcoding their files, doing it at such a high level is absolutely amazing to me. It really is, and it really says a lot about what they're doing on the bleeding edge. And on a side note, if anybody's just interested in just interesting infrastructure, go look up Netflix. They are really doing some next level stuff, like just incredible. I mean, kudos to them, and they have great movies. But yeah, man, complex architecture. So you're thinking about, so even beyond hooking everything up, even just the functions, right? What do I need this function to do? How big is this function too big? Is it too small? Do I need more memory for it? Do I need less memory for it? Like these are things you start thinking about when you're starting to put these functions together. How many functions is too much? At some point, there are too many functions and I have to manage all of these, right? I have to manage these because at the end of the day, if I'm using this thing as like my back-end API, I want to know where all the pieces of my API are. And there really aren't a lot of tools out there that actually organize it. There's a serverless framework, which I love. I think it's great. I think it's they do a really good job. And what they do is You spin up a serverless infrastructure. I mean, you spin up a serverless framework kind of app per se, and they give you a YAML file, and the YAML file has like how all of these functions are going to be mapped, what events are going to trigger them, what handle is it going to call, what node environment is this going to be in, so on and so forth. It has all of these things, and you got all of your functions and lambdas kind of organized together. I think serverless framework is really cool to solve that problem of managing. But once again, when you're doing things to scale, it might be a completely different beast. That was function management. So we'll go on to the next one. And I know I talked about cold starts and how those resources get reallocated. If you're not using them, they get reallocated somewhere else, right? So you kind of got to come up with hacky ways to keep your Lambda performing, right? So like AWS has like CloudWatch schedule, where you can literally schedule your Lambda to invoke every 4 hours, 5 hours, 6 hours, whatever. The whole thing, right, is, which I've been reading a lot of studies on, is like, when does performance drop off for a Lambda? Is it 30 minutes? Is it an hour? Is it 2 hours, 4 hours? How long does it take before I start seeing that my Lambda is not as performant as it should be? And then you got to start taking into account, okay, is AWS cutting off the Lambdas that use 1.5 gigs of memory first? Are they cutting off the ones at 128 megabytes first for memory? Like, there are a lot of things that these vendors don't explain in regards to the limitations and how they necessarily make decisions with these services that kind of can be tough if you're trying to architect a system and somebody's asking questions about performance. You can't give them just straight black and white answer because you just don't know, because AWS, Microsoft, IBM, Google, they don't give this information when they talk about their function server. They just say, hey, we're managing it for you. How they decide how performant it's going to be, when it's going to be performant, where it's going to be hosted, you don't know any of that. So you just kind of, you can really be blindsided if you don't really run tests on it. Security. I think security is a big one. One of the big things with security, for example, is Auth0. Auth0, if you don't know, is a microservice that does handle authorization and authentication. And what happens is you hit this Auth0 endpoint, you hit this thing, and then boom, you're logged in. Dang, I'm in the game, baby. Let's go. All right, cool. We in here, but wait a minute. What's happening? What's happening? What are you returning me? What are you doing? Like, what is this thing doing? And as an example, on Auth0's website, they actually have an example of how to hook up an Angular 2 or Angular 4 app to Auth0. Perfect. This is great. So I use the code, it works, but then I start asking some questions. Because when it returns this payload and it gives you your access token, it sets your access token on your local storage. I said, that doesn't really feel right. That doesn't feel right that I'm getting this access token and I'm just sitting on local storage. It just doesn't feel right. And there are things like that that kind of make me think, like, is this the safest way to handle this? Is this the most secure way to handle this? An access token just sitting on somebody's computer and they don't even know what's going on. It's just a lot of bad things that can happen, right? Because people don't know. It's like my mom. She liked to go on websites. My mother likes to download illegal movies. Just call it what it is. She likes to download illegal movies, and it's kind of funny because I taught her how to do it. So I feel like I created this monster. And it's one of those things where she goes on these websites, man, Reggie, the new Planet of the Apes is out. I'm like, Mama, wait a minute. How did you mean like out in the movies? No, I mean, I have it on my computer. Oh, wow, it's on your computer. Oh, okay, cool. So what's the website? I'm looking at the website. Got naked girls on the side here. You got some Viagra ad here. Mom, this isn't safe. This is not cool. You probably shouldn't be clicking on anything on this website. You really don't know what's going on. Oh, Reggie, it's fine. It's fine. No, it's not. A week later, hey, Reggie, I got a virus on my computer. Is there a way you can get this thing off? I deal with things like this all the time. So I think about security, maybe not necessarily in a scaling big enterprise way, but I think about it because I'm like, man, mama, I don't want nobody to know where you live but me. I think about these things. These are things that I worry about. These are things that worry me. And these are things that you should be worried about as well, because you don't know what your family's doing. You don't know what your wife is doing. You don't know what your daughter is doing. You don't know what your brother is doing. All of these people going to these random websites and they don't really even know how the internet works, right? Access tokens just sitting there laying around, and people are using cross-site scripting attacks and all kinds of stuff to get people's information and all kinds of whatnot. So these are things that I think about when I'm thinking about what the hell is Auth doing? Because if my mom uses Auth to log into some website to see a movie, does she even know what somebody else, you know what I'm saying, what could be being placed on a computer or whatever? Because truth be told, if we're running these random websites, they could use Auth and it can look unique, but they can send a whole lot of other things with it that's not just your access token. So those are things I think about. So yeah, man, let's talk about the parts I use in this serverless architecture. Now, there's gonna be some pictures. You got questions, definitely ask. If you have opinions of my code, we can fight outside. You know, it's one of those things that I'm not gonna sit here and say, I'm the greatest coder. I'm decent, but I try. Remember that. Cool, so S3. S3 is a object-based key value storage. Ooh, man, I got that down. Object-based key value storage offered by.
5 times fast.
Yeah. 5 times fast. I can't say 5 times fast, but I'll say it fast enough to pass this exam next Tuesday. Pray for me. S3 is it's storage, right? It's storage. But the cool thing about S3, if y'all, I'm pretty sure y'all all knew about the S3 outage, right? The thing that happened and had half the internet down. That's this. Right, that's this. This could hold your website. Hopefully the wrong guy isn't there working still. Y'all know how it happened, right? He like made like a wrong command. He like literally hit the wrong button, and like literally the entire region goes down. Like all the US East. Never mind. Okay.
Yeah, but if a new guy can crash your entire company,
exactly. You got it. I'm just saying. This is what people use to host websites and stuff. Be warned, and don't say I didn't tell you. But S3, object-based storage. You don't necessarily have to use S3. You can use GitHub. You can use anything that hosts a website, right? And you can get into the back end and whatnot. But the cool thing about S3 is if you do host a website on it, it's going to be pennies, literally pennies to host it, which is cool, which is really, really cool. You can even host an Angular front end. You can host a React front end. You can host a Vue.js front end. You can host whatever you want in there. And it's pretty nifty. And that is one of the things that was definitely in use. That was actually probably the biggest part. I wouldn't say the biggest part, but the part that I use the most. Because, so let me walk you through this app that I was creating. So I was creating this app that you upload a video. You upload the video into an S3 bucket. As soon as that event triggers, it triggers the Lambda. The Lambda takes the payload and says, ooh, a video. I'm going to transcode it. Transcodes it, throws into another bucket. Throws into another bucket. That event triggers another Lambda. And then it does this thing like, and sends it to Firebase. And then we get Angular talking to the Firebase database, and boom, voila. Serverless architecture. It does, but it's not that easy. It's not that simple. Because there are a lot of other gotchas when dealing with this stuff that they don't tell you about in their tutorials. And that's how they always get you. They get you with the tutorial. They make sure it works. And next thing you know, it's like, okay, time to make a real project. And all of a sudden, hey, this module can't load. Hey, you got it's pre-flight response, blah, 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 cores. Whatever, just name it. I've seen it. It's terrible, and it's not fun. And that's what happens whenever you try to experiment with this stuff. So here's a picture of S3. This is nice, it's pretty. I'm not gonna lie, I actually usually I prefer dealing with the AWS API through the CLI, API CLI. And this is it, right? So Amazon S3, that's the name of the bucket. You can create folders. Look, that's the test movie.mob. Look at that. July 20th, 2:30 a.m. That's how real this guy. I just want you to know, while y'all were asleep, I was trying to make this thing work. So if you got anything to say about this presentation, once again, see me outside. 1.7 megabytes, it tells you what region we're in, the whole shebang. I'm actually so happy that that data is there because y'all really do know how real this thing got. It got real. I was like, man, this thing is gonna work, and it did. But you know what? Ben Lesher be like, man, I appreciate you trying, but and it would be cool. And this is also cores. That might as well be renamed. This shit suck. Because that's what cores is to me. This is just not fun on any level. I've dealt with cores. It's literally like been a cores week. Like I feel like I've read every article about cores and I'm still like, what the hell is this thing? But yeah, cores, cores means cross-origin resource sharing. So basically, if I got this right, please somebody correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm still trying to understand. If you have like JavaScript, try to make some type of call to like a S3 bucket, right? That can be seen as, it used to be seen as a cross-site, attack or something like that. And this is basically saying, hey, look, any site with this whatever domain, we can allow it. We can allow them to do Git. We allow them to do post, and whatever in their header. We're not even, see, there's just a start. This is all dangerous. Don't do this. I just did this for testing purposes. Don't actually do this. Don't, especially this. No, this is bad. This is terrible. Post, don't do that. No bueno, that's bad. But yeah, so I was just setting this thing up because I wanted to allow literally JavaScript or Angular to input a video file directly from Angular. And I wanted the bucket to allow that put action to occur. It didn't. And that's why, the devil. The devil is why it didn't happen. And I'm still figuring it out. I'm still going to continue to figure it out. I'm even going to give you my GitHub link or my GitHub page. And y'all can follow me as I continue to make this thing work. Judge me, make issues, do whatever you want. But once again, if you got something bad to say about my code, see me outside. On to the next thing, Lambdas, which we've talked so extensively about. Function as a service, can be used as a backend and handle backend processes. Just look at backend and backend. It's just a backend type of day. And here's the thing. So Lambda's pretty cool, right? Like you can set environment variables. I can tell it, hey, this is my region. This is my transcoder pipeline. You can do all this stuff, to kind of create this environment with your Lambda. You can even write it in C#, in Java, because I know some of y'all in here like Java. Why? I don't know, but y'all like it. Node, Python, and there is even some abstractions out there that allow you to write it in Go, which I think that's pretty interesting. I kind of want to look into it because everybody says you need to learn Go, and I'm kind of like, Go looks kind of cool, but then they're like, well, I'll give it a try. But you can do it. I forgot what is this called that actually allows you to write it in Go. I don't think you can write it in Ruby though. Why would you write it in Ruby? I have no idea. But do people still write Ruby in here? Anybody? I know, man. Ruby just it's just a slow burn, man. Just die. Like just die. Just go away. And here's some monitoring that does come with Lambda, right? So you can see your invocation count, invocation duration, invocation errors. These things are cool. It's a couple of other ones that will be down here, but For the most part, yeah, like that's like it that they give you. Trash. This is trash. Imagine trying to monitor an app and you're looking at this like, yeah, that's what's throttling it. This is not gonna work. This is not gonna work, man. This is not gonna work. I have a guy at work who works with me, sysops guy. He would look at this and be like, what the hell? And because he knows nothing about serverless. And he's like, it's cool. And then I show him this, he's like, this isn't cool. So yeah, I mean, it comes with a couple of things, but I think you would have to use something like IOPipe. IOPipe.com is a kind of like a serverless or a function as a service monitoring service or tool that you could use. That's really it. That's really all that I know of. I'm sure there are more tools in development that are coming down the pipeline, but I know, and AWS has something called step functions, which is kind of cool. Haven't really played with it, but it seems like it might be good. I don't know. And the most important part, logs. Yes, logs. They do come with logs. This what you're seeing right here is what happens or what an event passes to Lambda. So what you're looking for is like, here's the record, here's this whole event, all this stuff going on, event time, and all this kind of stuff, right? And then you're like, okay, it's an event. What event is it? Oh, S3, cool. There it goes, S3, bucket. All right, cool, name of the bucket. So, you know what I'm saying? It passes all of this information to you or to the Lambda. And the Lambda, and basically whenever you create your function, you basically have to set this variable that's like, hey, event dot records of blah, 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 blah. And you go and grab it, throw it into it, and then you can do whatever the hell you want to do with it. Everybody good? Y'all good? Y'all want some pizza, some water, a hug? Let me know. No? All right, cool. Don't say I didn't ask, especially about the hug part. Elastic Transcoder. I think this is a cool service. I like this service. This is a service offered by AWS that I use to transcode the actual test-movie.mov file into an MP4 file. And so what transcoder does is transcoder, you create this pipeline, right? So you create the pipeline. Matter of fact, I didn't even got the code for it. So you create this pipeline, right? And then when you create the pipeline, what happens is you create a job and you pass these params to the job. And here's just like an example of the params. Obviously the file is a little bit longer than this, but here's what I was talking about where you say event.records and you literally get what you're trying to get, the key, and then you take the key and you do all this source code stuff, blah, 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 judge me if you want to. And you pass through the pipeline, right? And so you have an input, which you'll put the key in there, and then you tell it what you want it to output. You want to output a 720p video, a 1080p video, an audio file, MP3 file, whatever. You can output it that, and you can tell it where to output it at. So basically what I did was I upload the file into the bucket. The event fires off the Lambda. The Lambda takes the payload. The payload passes it to the payload, does its thing to Elastic Transcoder. Elastic Transcoder puts into another bucket. That's what happens. And boom, voila, you got like a whole video, like transcode and all that kind of stuff, which I'm pretty sure that Netflix is definitely using this. I have a hard time seeing why they would not use that, because when you sit down and you think about those movies, you think about, okay, there's probably different formatted movies depending on what type of device you use, so on and so forth, blah, 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 size of screen, yada. I don't want to send you 4K video to your mobile device. Like you're not gonna benefit from a 4K resolution on your mobile device. So I'm pretty sure they take it and they take whatever outputs and they send these different outputs to different buckets, and those buckets go out to whatever CloudFront distribution, and voila, you get it to your mobile. You get one mobile video type, you get your big screen video type, you get your medium screen, you get your all that kind of stuff. So I'm pretty sure this is what Netflix is using, if anybody's interested. Netflix is like my favorite company, so hate on me if you want to, but I like Netflix. Although Definitely talked about Auth a lot already. We know what it does. Authenticate manages users. I didn't talk about the manages users part, which is pretty interesting. I didn't really dive too much into that because I just want the damn thing to work. But here is a picture of Angular. And this is just me setting up Auth, right? So obviously this is a file that I actually imported in to this service, and all of the actual real stuff is lying somewhere else. And I use this function to log in, use this to handle authentication, right? And so this is probably like the most interesting part, because this part right here gave me a lot of problems. So whenever you talk to Auth and you authenticate, it passes you back access token, ID token. And truth be told, you can actually return just the access token, or you can return just the ID token. It depends on whatever your preference is. But it was kind of weird though, because I realized that they made a change, which we talked about earlier as one of the cons. When you're dealing with microservices and serverless infrastructure, people can make changes to the API and not tell you. And now you're sitting here looking at your application like, why is this thing not working? Well, that happened here with that thing right there. And that literally took me 3 or 4 hours of reading through documentations and comments and all that kind of stuff. And finally somebody said, oh, hey, man, they made a change to their GitHub, man. Wait, what? Like I've spent like 3 or 4 hours. I'm thinking I'm making bad code, and literally they changed the API. And that's one of those pain points that I talk about, because when you're using somebody else's service, because that's really all microservices are, they're lending you a service to use to put into your application. You don't have any control over what they do with the service. Only thing you have control over is how you use the service. And that's just, like I said, that's annoying. Like, I shouldn't have to read for 3 or 4 hours to find out, hey, they changed the API and I can't use that anymore, to find out why this thing doesn't work. So
was it like buried in the documentation somewhere?
Oh, even worse. It wasn't buried in the documentation. Oh, I was asked if the change in the API was buried in the documentation. No, they didn't even have the respect for their customers to even put it in the documentation. I had to find it in comments. I had to find it on a GitHub issue. That's how I found it. Because people were talking about it. Everybody was like, hey, this thing's not working. This thing's not working. And this is what makes it even worse. This is what makes it even frustrating. The example that I used, that I talked about, that they used this Angular example to hook up Auth, guess where this is from? It's from the example. What? You can't even change the example to let me know? Like, I'm literally using your example from your company to hook this thing up. And you can't even put a note at the bottom, a footnote, like, hey, man, just saying we changed the API. That's all I'm asking for. Hey, that's it. That's all I'm asking for. Hey, man, we changed the API just so y'all know. And they did. And I spent hours, like, literally pulling my hair out, what hair that I have, trying to figure this thing out. So, but I figured it out. And, man, just a lot of time wasted. Golly, Auth, just, whew, man, my goodness. Yeah, so here we go. Like, so I talked about security, right? And my mom downloading movies illegally. Yeah, man. So this is how you set your session up, right? So you set these items. Remember that access token that it changed? There you go. Boom, right there. Token, ID token. You set all these items on local storage, right? But I actually did some more research, found out the vulnerability of cross-site scripting. I recommend that you store these things inside of a cookie. And you pass it as a cookie, and it has an extra layer of security in it. But you know, at the end of the day, man, it's some hacker out there, man. If he can break into Sony, he can break into your little rinky-dink app. So, you know, it's kind of like, I mean, you think about stuff like that, I mean, and you just kind of like, man, if they want to really get into here, they're going to get in here. That's just the reality of the situation. But thank God I'm not producing anything on that level that anybody even cares remotely of where I'm setting my tokens at least right now I'm not. Firebase. So this is Google service, and Firebase is interesting. It's a database as a service all from Google, which allows your client-side app to communicate directly to a database. Now, it sounds cool, right? Because we push so much of the logic into our client-side apps, whether it be React, Vue, Angular, all that kind of stuff. But then there's kind of like, it can talk straight to the database. It can talk straight to the database. It's kind of like, it's like you got that cousin this is like always unfiltered and always says what they want, and and you're like that person that's like the median between you and your aunt or your uncle or something like that. And you're like, look, man, I know you pissed off right now, but tell me and I'll tell them. And things usually go a lot smoother that way. Now imagine your cousin being able to just say whatever the hell he wanted to his aunt or his uncle, and you're not there. Chances are he probably gonna get his ass whooped and you're not gonna be there to protect him. And I feel like that's the situation with Angular. I feel like this is a situation where you're dealing with these kinds of things, is that you really don't want, I don't know, I'm in the air about this. I probably need to do more research and read about what's going on between that connection when you make it between like an Angular and Firebase and kind of what it's doing. It seems like you would really want to make sure that the data that you're sending between the two is encrypted, or you're doing some type of client-side encryption or something. I feel like you want to do something to make sure it's securing, but whatever. I need a database at the end of the day. And this is what I use. And this is what it looks like inside of the Google Firebase app, right? It just looks like JSON, like, oh, videos and jibbly-jibbly-doo and source and transcoding. And you can add all these things and you can map it through the Lambda and you can have it do its thing. And it's pretty easy. The cool thing about it is it's very, 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 very easy to set up. It's super simple to set up. I just set up all of my configuration files and stuff in my environment file in Angular, import this thing into my module file, initialize app, environment.firebase, boom, that bad boy off and running. Like, real simple. Like, they made it super simple, too simple, for you to connect your client-side app to a database. Here's a look at some stuff that I was doing. This is how I brought it into my home component, right? And it's really simple, right? So I got this fire list observable. I put it into the items, or this items is going to be of type, fire list observable, any blah, 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 blah. And then right here, throw it into constructor. And then this.items, db.list, videos. So that video right there, videos. And that's it. Like, it was really just that simple. And yeah, and then you just go into the HTML file, do that, ng4, let item of items be blah, 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 and boom, you're like right there. It was very simple. It was very simple to take the data and stuff out of Firebase and use it on Angular. So that's actually something I probably would look more into in the future, because I thought, yeah, I really do think they work well together. API Gateway. So API Gateway. API Gateway is it's a HTTP server, and what you can do with it is that Lambda has this limitation, right? Lambda is really, or functions as a server is really best to be used with events. You add something to a bucket, you trigger something here, trigger something there. It's not so much good for actually hitting the actual Lambda from some post, get, put, delete. You can't do that. API Gateway is a service that AWS uses. And it allows you to set up an API, and you can hit the API, and the API triggers the Lambda, and the Lambda returns whatever it needs to return. And I just said that. So this is what it looks like in AWS, right? So this isn't actually this is kind of my code, but it's not my code. But either way, so you got like the S3 policy document user profile. And so what happens is like this is the client side. So this will be Angular. You make the method request, boom, boom, boom. Integration, hits this proxy, changes to whatever you change it to, hits the Lambda, and then it returns a response right back to the client. It seems like it's that simple, but it's not that simple. Because you got to integrate, you got to turn on cores here, typically, in order for you to do things like put posts, so on and so forth. You do have to implement cores, which once again, that's the devil. And those are all of the parts that I use. How much is this thing gonna cost?
$15 a month.
It might be cheaper than that.
That's how much it is.
Oh, okay. Well, somebody, for people that couldn't hear, somebody in here says it costs them $15 a month to hook up their serverless architecture, which is pretty good. Man, what are you doing for $15 a month? What is?
I have multiple.
Okay, see, you didn't say that. So this person has multiple architectures that they're hosting, and they're spending $15 a month. See, that's a very important detail that you got to include on things like this, because you're going to have everybody out here thinking like, $15 a month, what does she got that costs $15 a month? Because when I go through the prices, you're going to be like, that doesn't even make sense that she's paying $15 a month. So Lambda free tier includes 1 million free requests per month, up to 400 gigabytes per second compute time. I don't know if you have a Lambda that's going to require 1 million requests. If you do, you probably should be using the server. I'm just saying. 1 million requests, bro? Like, really? I was like, y'all just giving it away. Like, this doesn't even make sense. But yeah, 1 million requests. Yeah. Duration. Now, once you get past that 1 million requests, they start billing you based on the duration, right? And it usually rounds up per 100 milliseconds, like whatever. So they would charge you 100 milliseconds, 200 milliseconds, 300 milliseconds. And the prices are based on that. And it'll be like you use 29 megabytes of memory in 100 milliseconds. And they'll add all these things up, and that's how you'll be charged for it. The fact that people even get charged for Lambda is actually really impressive. Wow. Just amazing. Just great marketing team, I guess. And yeah, the cost is gonna vary depending on the Lambda, yada yada yada. S3. S3's cost is depending on how much storage you use. It's really just that simple. The more you use, the more you pay. The less you use, the less you pay. It's pretty straightforward. Firebase. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
The storage. So, like, what's the build up price for storage? You know,
like the build, what, like
oh, per like gig or whatever. How much would they charge you?
I hear you. I hear you. So the question was asked: how much are you billed per like gigabyte of storage? If I recall, with S3, off the top of my head, I don't really know, but usually you're billed like by chunks of gigabytes, I want to say.
Okay.
So yeah, so it's not like one of those things. Like the more you use, actually, like the less per gigabyte it costs. So it's kind of like you buying in bulk, then the price goes down. Exactly.
My husband was using Firebase for a long time, and it was free, and he was free and doing all kinds of stuff. And then he put a loop accidentally, one of those loops that, and then all of a sudden it was like, you owe us $25.
Yeah,
It just kept running and pinging over and over again. And he just broke.
Yeah, like
for a long run, loop's pretty good.
Yeah, it's kind of funny, man, because Firebase, 100 simultaneous connections on their free tier, 10 gigs a month downloaded, but it doesn't have automated backups. But it's like kind of quite of a jump to go from like free to, hey, you owe us $25. It's like, did y'all think this through? Or I feel like it should have been kind of more of a pay as you go, pay for what you use type thing. Yeah, like I mean, just
That's how we found it.
Wait a minute.
just think about it. Just you go 1.01 gigabyte and it's $25 smooth to your billing account. It's like, bro, it's messed up. Yes, sir. Firebase. So the maximum is not $25. So the question was asked: is it $25 maximum for all the services in Firebase? No, because there's even a tier or a limit for the $25, and once you go beyond the $25, you have to pay more. And they just say pay as you go, which basically interpreted to me means this shit getting expensive.
Hey Reggie,
Yes.
Alex just put, you probably don't have the chat up there, but Alex just put a link in the chat for Amazon pricing.
Nice. So anybody looking for Amazon pricing, thank you, Alex. I really appreciate that. Definitely check out Amazon pricing. They lay it out. Amazon is this. Let me show you my frustration with Amazon. They do a damn good job of letting you know how much things cost, but they do a terrible job of letting you know how these things work. And that's just the fact of the matter. Their API is trash. Their documentation is trash. Poo cheese. Oh my goodness. Woo. Huh? You can definitely quote me on
I've
that.
already started tweeting all of my favorite Reggie quotes tonight.
Yeah. I'm just saying, man, I love AWS, but man, their documentation is poo cheese trash. I'll tell you what, like,
I'll tweet it, I'll retweet it.
my goodness, it is bad. It's all bad. It's all bad. Yeah, TechFest. What is TechFest? Oh man, I should have maybe. I don't know.
Like they were beat up.
Oh man, I'm probably still cooler than those guys, but it's cool. Also, free up to 7,000 users, unlimited logins. I mean, if you got more than 7,000 users, you probably making the money, not even worried about how much it costs after that. I'm just saying, if you got more than 7,000 users and you worried about this not being free anymore, you have a way bigger problem on your hand. You probably need to talk to your business analyst. I'm just saying. Is this something worth implementing on my next project? Parts not all, right? I wouldn't do a full-on serverless architecture. I wouldn't do it. There's actually a really, really good site. Y'all want to see like serverless architecture done to the T? Go to acloud.guru. acloud.guru. That site is just phenomenal. And it's 100% serverless. But these are also the guys that organize serverless conf. Like these are literally the guys at the bleeding edge of serverless. So they know the ins, the outs, the what's, the hows, and all that kind of stuff. But their site is amazing. It's a really good site. And they use S3. They use straight Amazon Auto, like all the way through. I really couldn't recommend them any higher. I think they're it when it comes to serverless. Like I'll probably learn most of my knowledge of serverless through a cloud guru. So definitely check those guys out. But no, I say parts not all. I think if anything with serverless, configuration is the toughest hurdle. Configuration is going to be toughest hurdle, especially when you start, yeah, your functions are going to scale. But when you're scaling, you add more microservices and you got to organize all of this stuff, and you might have to hook up a messaging system. It just is, it's going to get messy. It's going to get messy. So I think serverless as of right now is best used kind of like it's like a nice side dish. You know, you get some chicken, you might want some fries, you might want some green beans, you might want some mashed potatoes. But when you get about 10 sides along with your chicken, it's like, bro, are you eating the chicken or are you eating the sides? Like, that's kind of how I look at serverless. It's good in parts, not just, you can't just have a smorgasbord of serverless architecture running throughout your project.
It seems like nowadays you go Google online and figure out like how to do a server for your own system, for your own mobile app, whatever. You can't really find anything like, as far as like, how to set up your security for your stuff, whatever. It's like all serverless.
Yeah, like Yeah, and then they say, hey, man, you don't got to worry about it. You don't have to maintain it, man. It's all good. And you're like, wait a minute.
I want to do myself.
Yeah, like, nah. And there's going to be a lot of old school people that are like that, right? It's a lot of old school people that are used to .NET and all that kind of stuff. They're like, man, screw that serverless. I'm putting this thing on my own servers. Like, y'all can kiss my whole ass. I don't care. I don't care. I don't trust the Googles. I don't trust the I can't blame them. I can't blame a person for saying, like, I'd rather host this on my own server than forego my rights, if you will, and give them up to AWS or give them up to Google or IBM or whoever else has a cloud platform that is implementing these serverless architectures. I think control is like one of those. I feel like with technology, it's like the people that understand it are fighting for the control, while the people that don't understand it are just willingly giving it away. Because you understand the importance of control. Because you don't know what are they going to do with this information? What are they doing with this data?
For example, Parse. I only heard of Parse before. They were like a back-end service.
Okay.
And they shut down. I think they shut down when people started moving us over somewhere else.
Okay.
But they like one day decided, oh yeah, we're going to shut down. People were like, oh, we need to move our stuff. Where they kind of like gave you an option where you can go with it. But it's like,
right.
Not gonna,
right. And you were here in the other part of my discussion where I talked about that being one of the kinds of dealing with serverless architecture is that you're giving up a lot. You know what I'm saying? You're giving up a lot. And
you missed the con section of the pros and cons.
Yeah, you missed the con section. It was good, man. I went in. I went in, bro. I spare no expense, man. If you're my friend, I'm gonna tell you the good things, I'm gonna tell you the bad things. But guess what? We still friends. And that's the whole thing. Here's some resources that I use. Ooh, that list is long. A Cloud Guru. These two books, pretty cool. AWS Lambda in Action by Manning Publications. Serverless Architectures on AWS by Manning Publications. I'm not gonna lie, Manning Publications, technical book company, and then O'Reilly. Like I just love Manning. Like they just do something for me. They like tickle my fancy. WTF is Operations Serverless Framework. What is serverless computer? These are all articles that I read to get, better understanding of serverless architecture, pros, cons, things of that nature. Yeah, if you ever, if y'all want to look at it, blah, 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 blah. I might even put out the link to my slides. It's actually on my GitHub, and these are actually clickable. That's why they're blue. So you can click on them. I'm just saying, so if you want to click on the link and learn a little bit more, by all means, have yourself a jolly old time. I don't know about y'all. I like learning things. I like learning things a lot. I sacrifice sleep to learn things. And I want to learn things as quickly as possible a lot of the times. And because of this, I enjoy doing things like I'm doing right now. So if you do want to learn something fast, give a talk. I'm just saying. Give a talk. Because you don't know how nerve-wracking it is to come up here and act like you know something that you really don't know. Or you know it, but you're like, can I even communicate this in an effective way? And you're thinking about all these different variables. Man, it's going to be that old guy that's been programming for 15 years. He's going to ask me about Pascal. Can I use Pascal and whatever and Fortran with this? I'm going to be like, what the hell is that? You think about those things. And you're going to do your damnedest to prepare for whatever questions that people have to throw at you, right? Because you don't want to be caught with your pants down. And giving a talk will really force you to dive deep and to try to understand these things that you're about to go and communicate with a group of people that may have or may know way more than you do. And I'm going to be honest with you, the most uncomfortable position to be in is when you're teaching stuff like this and there's some guy in there that's been programming longer than you've been alive. And hey man, I'm just saying, man, I've been doing this thing since you were in your, look, I'm not gonna say it, but y'all knew what I was getting at. It's always that guy in there. And that guy scares me. I'm not gonna lie, he gives me nightmares. But if you wanna learn it, give a talk. And then when people ask you questions, they can poke holes in your knowledge and make you feel stupid again and learn it all over again and see how much you know. Oh yeah, follow my progress. It's funny how I made the follow my progress so big and I made like the link to my GitHub so small. It's almost like I don't want you to go here. But yeah, go here and look at it and my bad code and tell me how bad it is. And if you want to pair and stuff, we can pair. And you can tell me how bad it is, and I can tell you how bad you are at communicating with me about how bad my code is.
Because you're mad.
Yeah, because I'm the mad black guy. Yeah, and I think that's like the end of it. Boom, yeah, that's it. So, yeah, questions, concerns, hole poking. What's up?
Backend.
Define backend.
Backend is basically another one of those.
Backend as a service?
Yeah. The one I'm currently using right now, I'm trying to be.
Backend is a, but back, like.
You had a concern about AWS, like with the calling directly into the database.
Okay.
Like and I was like, well, you know, I can't see it that bad. I'm pretty sure when you call those functions, they're actually encrypting it on their end somewhere.
I see what you're saying. So the question that was asked to me was, how much do I know about backend? I know a lot about my backend. I don't know about backends in general.
There's a company called Backend.
Oh, I don't know anything about backend the company. Yeah. I'm not even gonna lie. Okay. Yeah, I'm not even gonna lie to you, man. I have no idea who they are. This is my first time. I'm actually gonna go home and look them up.
I'm sorry. I just.
Yeah, I was like.
I through this thing, like,
I can tell you about my. Yeah, man, I can tell you about my own. I can't tell you about them. I clean it every day, I promise. Any other questions, concerns, observations, experiences with serverless? Anybody? Nobody? Somebody?
I just gotta say,
yes.
That was the funniest talk we have ever had.
That's what I'm talking about.
Awesome.
Cool, yeah. All right. That just made